This week, Google knows where you've been. Microsoft releases an interesting patch. GitHub helps secure your code. Amazon fixes its key, destroying your kids' watches. ASLR is vulnerable, and so are your printers. Again, in a different way. Don Pizzette from IT Pro TV joins us for expert commentary on securing your S3 buckets. So stay tuned. All that and more on this edition of Hack Naked News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show that brings you the security news each week. And despite popular belief, we do wear pants. It's Hack Naked News.
Most of the organizations I work with, they have
released. Yes, you read it.
actually do.
The original Linux kernel security with Linux.
So I hope everybody has their resistance built up.
Brought to you by. Make sure your team is prepared to fight off the latest cybersecurity threat. IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team skills up to date. You can stream IT Pro TV's courses live and on demand worldwide, so there's no need to send staff to off-site training. Their team solution provides access to a supervisor portal for full control over your team's training schedule and group analytics. Go to itpro.tv/hacknaked and use the code HN30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Welcome, everyone, to Hack Naked News, episode 150 for Tuesday, November 21st, 2017. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, from the newly designed Hack Naked TV /Enterprise Security Weekly /Startup Security Weekly set. That doesn't really roll off the tongue. I want to have a quick announcement before we get started with some news and our expert commentary with Don Pizzette, who's from itpro.tv, which you can visit itpro.tv/hacknaked, get fabulous discounts, 30% off, start your supervisor portal. That's right, your company can buy access to itpro TV's vast assortment of IT and security training so that you can have access to, well, train yourself up. And you should do that. So go do that. But first, listen to the news. Or, you know what, you can pause the news and then sign up and then come back. Okay, nice to have you back. And now, the security news. Google collects Android location data even when the location service is disabled. Did you know, excuse me, did you know that I need a drink of water and that each time your Android device comes within range of a new cell tower, it gathers the cell tower address and sends it back to Google when the device is connected to Wi-Fi or the cellular data network is enabled. This according to an independent study that also states this feature cannot be disabled. Although the company said that it is, Google says it's never used or stored this location data it collected on its users and that it's now taking steps to end this practice. This data could be used to target location-based advertisement when the user enters a store or a restaurant. According to Google, Android phones will no longer gather and send cell tower location data back to Google by the end of the month. Thank you, Google, because you're not evil, except for that one time before the end of the month where you collected data. But that's okay. It's good. We're good. Microsoft has released an out-of-band patch. This one is more interesting. After some careful analysis, it appears that Microsoft fixed the buffer overflow directly in the binary by not recompiling from source. Essentially, they compared different versions of the binary. Binaries tend to pick up some different signatures when they're recompiled. Address spaces change. They did not notice those changes on this binary for the equation editor and determined that Microsoft changed the binary itself. It only changed a couple of things specific to basically a font name buffer overflow. Now, further evidence suggests that Microsoft may not have the source code or either not have permission to modify the source code, as the equation editor was developed by a third party. While it's interesting, this and that is very interesting from a technical perspective, this out-of-band patch typically means that Microsoft thinks it's important, so you should probably get to patching. GitHub has given you a little gift. It will now, if you're including vulnerable libraries in your code, GitHub will point them out to you. It's a nice feature. The alerts are based on public vulnerabilities in Ruby, GEMS, NPM, and the package manager for Node.js on MITRE's common vulnerabilities and exposures, or CVEs. GitHub will add Python to its vulnerability alert service in 2018. Now, if only we could get similar program for WordPress plugins. Amazon to fix key home security vulnerability. Now, don't get me wrong. I hate it when I miss my package deliveries. In fact, I missed one this morning. While annoying, I'm certainly don't think it's a good idea to give delivery people access to your home or business, which is the sole premise of Amazon's key technology, which allows the delivery person to unlock your door and then, under careful surveillance of a webcam, leave your packages and exit. However, researchers discovered they could jam the Wi-Fi on the camera, freezing it in a known good state, then steal all of your belongings. Amazon claims it will fix the vulnerability and has not provided a timeline. Germany slaps a ban on kids' smartwatches for being secret spyware. Germany takes privacy seriously as the German telecoms regulator has banned the sale of children's smartwatches that allow users to secretly listen in on nearby conversations. They are recommending that the devices be destroyed. Try explaining that one to your kids. Hey, can I have your watch? Smash it with a hammer. That's a lesson for you kids. Privacy is important. Alrighty, US CERT warns of ASLR implementation flaw in Windows. Will Dorman, a senior vulnerability analyst with CERT, discovered that Windows 8 and later fail to properly randomize every application of system-wide mandatory ASLR if system-wide mandatory ASLR is enabled via Emmet or Windows Defender Exploit Guard. Dorman wrote, under those specific conditions, a flawed implementation could create an opportunity for an attacker to pull off a memory-based attack. No patch exists yet for this vulnerability, the US CERT bulletin said. However, a workaround is offered along with, starting with enabling system-wide bottom-up ASLR on systems that have a system-wide mandatory ASLR. You can read more about that in the show notes. Patches on the way this week for HP printer vulnerabilities, and this is one you're going to want to read about a lot more too, because it's a huge technical write-up that I don't have all of the details. However, I am told that sysadmins have been advised to watch for a patch rather, for HP printer firmware update that will plug a remote code execution vulnerability, among others, in its MFP 586 and M553 printers. News of the threat emerged from a Foxglove Security deep dive into printer security, which is a very lengthy read, which I'm still digesting and hopefully going to cover on Paul Security Weekly, and warn people that they should apply patches. And will be released this week. Intel has patched the Manage Engine for some critical vulnerabilities, releasing patches for firmware representing Intel Management Engine, ME, Intel Server Platform Services, or SPS, and Intel Trusted Execution Engine, TXE. Researchers will be presenting the findings at the upcoming Black Hat Europe conference on December 6th. It's pretty scary. The article quotes, the main system can remain functional, so the user may not even suspect that his or her computer now has malware resistant to reinstalling of the OS and updating the BIOS. There is a detection tool that was released. However, with the holiday break coming up, this represents some bad timing. Now we'll take a very short break and come back with none other than Don Pizzette from IT Pro TV.
Has your network been breached? Cybereason can help you answer this question. Cybereason products hunt for threats within your network and eliminate them in real time. To Cybereason, real time means within seconds. Founded by former military hackers who don't play by the rules, they've built this experience into their platform. Harness ingenuity and imagination, not just code, to defeat attackers. Cybereason, disrupt the adversary and let the hunt begin.
Welcome back, everyone, to Hack Naked News. Here with me is Don Pizzette, IT Pro TV. We're going to talk about S3 buckets and why you should have them and leave all your sensitive data accessible to the entire world, right, Don? Isn't that how it works?
Well, yeah, that's the whole point, right? When you get near limitless storage, it's available with near limitless bandwidth. Why wouldn't you make that available to the whole world? That's exactly what I'd do.
I tell you what is available to the whole world. Really quick, our webcast program, securityweekly.com/insider. Sign up for our mailing list. Please do that, and you'll hear about some awesome upcoming webcasts. So, now, Don, it's been in the news quite a bit this year, in fact, that organizations have basically left sensitive data in unsecured S3 buckets. What's the reason for this? What's behind it, and what can I do to protect myself?
You know, it's funny because it's happened so much now that it's almost not even worth reporting on it, right? It's only when the really big caches are discovered. But there's several security researchers that are kind of making their name by saying, hey, we're just going to scan S3 all day. And eventually we hit these open buckets and we find all sorts of really great stuff. I'm sure they find tons of non-important data too, but it gives them that chance to report on it. And there are a number of instances where a lot of times it ends up being contractors that have access to data and they decide they need to store it somewhere, and they store it in S3 because you can get a ton of storage for very, very inexpensive. But if it's not properly secured, it's not just publicly available, but I mean, it is fast. There's a lot of bandwidth attached to it. Somebody who finds that data can copy it very, very quickly, which makes the risk really, really high. And the sad part is it's actually not that hard to protect from it. It's actually pretty easy, right? S3 buckets, there's more than one security mechanism in place. I know I've heard from some people where they say, well, if I want to secure the bucket, I've got to write an IAM policy, and I've got to define all these different settings about what permissions I want where, and it's really hard. Well, yeah, there's IAM policies. There's also just straight up bucket policies that you could do. They're both pretty easy, and even if you don't know how to do them, Amazon actually gives you a little wizard, like a tool that you can launch that it's called the AWS Policy Generator, that you just tell it what you want, and it'll give you the syntax and spit it out. Like they have bent over backwards to try and make it as easy as possible, but people keep creating these buckets, and there's one little check mark when you create a bucket that says make it publicly available. And people do that, and they're not restricting it. And we keep seeing not just like little bits of data, but huge chunks of data getting leaked. And the one that happened a couple of days ago was a contractor that was working with the U.S. government and storing social media data, right? Tweets, Facebook posts, any kind of social media communications. They created this multi-terabyte archive of all this social media data so that the military could use it when they were tracking terrorists. They could do a quick lookup and say, all right, let me look at all this without actually having to go and pull warrants and other things to alert the social media systems. That data in itself is already public, but having it collected in one place like that makes it where we can actually leverage that to use it for something. And I think that people need to be a lot more responsible with how they're storing that data. And it just keeps happening over and over and over again. It's like, people running bad WordPress plugins. You can only kind of beat that into the ground so many times.
But Don, if I'm a large organization or military or government or the like, and I've got thousands of people potentially, maybe not thousands, hundreds of people that have administrator access and are doing stuff in Amazon AWS to support the infrastructure of the business, how do I discover if someone has checked that box? Because there's a lot of controls I can put in place. I feel like inevitably someone's going to click that box. Like, what can I do to be notified of that or scan to see if that's happened in my environment?
All right, so a lot of companies have the excuse of saying, well, we're small. We don't have the staff for that. We trust our contractors to do the work for us. In this case, it was CENTCOM, right? So CENTCOM, they've got the funding. They've got the staff.
Yeah.
So what they should have done, and really what any organization should do, is if you're leveraging a contractor or even your own employees, if you know you've got a large data set, you need to be aware of every single copy of that data. Where is it being stored? If it's a large data set, you should be able to track that. In this case, the data had to be turned over to a contractor, right? So who did that handoff? How did that work? And in that handoff process, there need to be strict controls over where that data is being placed. There's no reason the contractor had to have their own S3 buckets. And I don't know if they ever actually disclosed that. Was it the contractor's own S3 or was it the military's? I would imagine it was the contractors, because there is a special AWS, they call it GovCloud, that's for government agencies. This wasn't in it. This was in the regular AWS. So that means that the data was turned over to the contractor and there weren't controls put in place to track where that data was going. It's the equivalent of giving somebody a USB key packed full of data and just trusting they deal with it responsibly.
Yeah, and I like your approach to the problem a lot, Don. It's not necessarily a technical control on my AWS environment. It's a data handling, training and awareness and policy and procedures that need to take place to make sure that when you're transferring data and giving it to someone, that they don't just leave it on a USB key and leave it in the parking lot or in the coffee shop, that they're not sharing it out on Dropbox or the other 8 million ways they could share it, right? It's telling that person that they shouldn't do that. And also being able to detect if your data is on the internet. There are companies that provide, some of those services as well. But the preventative phase that you're describing, Don, I think is the kind of the crux of the issue is whoever's going to be handling your data, employees or contractors or third parties, have to have an understanding of how it should be handled.
Yeah, and you mentioned finding the data. That's really, really hard to do. So, for example, if I feel like my environment's been breached and that somebody compromised my user database and that they're selling copies of it on the dark web, well, how can I figure that out? I'd have to go and buy a copy on the dark web to find out whether or not that was actually mine. Well, now I'm supporting the industry that I'm trying to protect myself from. So that's a catch-22 right there. But if I see the data being exfiltrated, if I see it leaving my network, or if I have controls as far as who's able to access the data in the first place, now I can see that. I still have that control. So we've got to understand any point where we lose control of our data. And in this case, there had to be a handoff, and it just needed a better policy in place for that. Barring just gross negligence on the behalf of the contractor, which I guess you could say there was here, right? Because they put it into S3 and they checked that little box to make it public. That should not have been possible. And if it was a controlled AWS account, when they delegate out privileges to somebody inside of IAM, you can set it where they're not allowed to create public S3 buckets. They can only create private ones. So taking the time to learn what the platform can do is another important part of protecting your data.
It's interesting being a training company. And we've had this conversation before, but I know other training companies that have slide materials. One of the tactics they employed was to put something inside of the data, inside of the PDF or PowerPoint that was like a watermark or some unique identifier that would show up potentially in some kind of Google-based search or other kind of searching mechanisms so that they could see if their materials were being pirated and going outside of the scope of where that information should be. But as you've stated, Don, that's difficult. It's not going to catch every instance and somewhat difficult to manage and maintain, because then you got to keep creating new keys and manage that.
Yeah, and on top of it, if you think about how sensitive your data is, right? And here we're talking about military data. Well, I mean, social media data, but used for military purposes. Let's go a little more benign, right? The secret formula for Coca-Cola. So that's something they protect, right? So maybe they put it in a PDF and they watermark it. They're going to give a copy to me, and so they watermark it. My name's all over it. I leak it out to the internet. Well, now they know I did it. They can sue me, but the formula's out. People know it, right? That secret is now worthless. So that's not enough to know who did the leak. We've got to be able to stop it from happening in the first place.
Do you think they actually store it in a digital form, though? I've always wondered that. Probably never know.
Yeah, it's what is it, like a cup of sugar per cup of water and some brown coloring. It's really easy.
It's probably, we always use it as an example of a secret. It's probably not secret anymore. Someone's figured out what the recipe, either that or it's in a special vault. And I'm thinking like Indiana Jones, like the Ark of the Covenant. It opens up and there's a glow, that comes from it. It's on this, piece of paper. Anyway,
it can't be too secret because they make the stuff every single day, right? There's employees that have to know it.
Yeah. Well, Don Pizzette, thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Closing thoughts?
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me. Always fun to come on and talk about topics, especially ones that I know we've talked about before. People aren't learning. We kind of keep revisiting them. So always glad to be back.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Don. With that concludes this episode of Hack Naked News. See you next time.